Our next presenter is Marty Schreiner, and while he's getting set up here, I'm just going to give a little intro. He is the head of Maps, Media, Data, and Government Information in the Harvard University Library, where he provides vision and leadership for the staff, collections, and services. He's also active as a composer, and his works include music for orchestra, chamber ensemble, chorus, and solo instruments. Since 1994, he has also included traditional Japanese instruments in many of his compositions. His music has won awards from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the New England Reed Trio International Chamber Music Composition Competition, and a Bryant Fellowship from Harvard University. If you refer to your speaker biography handout, you'll see that there's also a web page of streaming music available if you wish to listen to Marty's music after the meeting or over lunch. Marty Schreiner received his MS-LIS from Simmons, an MM in composition from the New England Conservatory of Music, and a BM from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And today he will be speaking to us on Building a Tower of Babel, or Charting an Interdisciplinary Map, the Subject Specialist in the 21st Century. And as soon as he has his computer up, he'll start his presentation. So please welcome Marty Schreiner.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also want to thank the New England Music Library Association for having me here today. I actually haven't been a music librarian for actually a number of years now, but I've still kept up my membership. And I think that means that once you're a music librarian, you're always a music librarian. So here I am. Actually, I have some software and some files in my laptop, and it's going to take this a little bit a while to warm up. But I actually planned my presentation to be able to begin before this lined up, so I think we'll be all right. The purpose of the session today is to promote further discussion around the topic of the evolving role of the subject librarian in the 21st century, and to raise the right essential questions to be asking ourselves about what these roles need to be. As a backdrop for my presentation, I will ask three questions posed in Paul Gauguin's famous painting, Where Do We Come From? What Are We? Where Are We Going? With these perennial questions as our foundation, I will take a larger perspective on what we have meant by subject specialties, what we seem to be thinking about subject specialization, especially now in a more interdisciplinary academic world, and hopefully spark further discussion on where we may be heading. So actually I have more questions today than answers, so I hope you're not expecting me to have answers. So the larger conversation is with the subject specialists in general. I will use some specific examples for the subject of music as a focus in talking about the current interdisciplinary work for research, teaching, and learning, and the technologies that are shaping our work in higher education. In many ways, it really is all about the technology of our time. There have been very productive and thoughtful and well-informed writing on the topic in the area of music librarianship. I presume you're all familiar with much of this literature, and some of you here have contributed very much to it. So I would not presume that I would have anything to add to this particular topic, especially since I am no longer a music librarian myself. However, I find my particular music subject background helps to inform some of the things that I am now involved in more broadly as they relate to media formats, audio, video software, new kinds of library spaces for multimedia authoring, and new collaborative teaching and learning environments within the library. So one important frame of reference for me in approaching this topic, and for me personally, actually, are the papers that were presented and the discussions that ensued for the Music Librarianship in America Symposium. I'm sure some of you were here to attend that, and that took place back in October of 1989 at Harvard. I was new to the profession of music librarianship in attending this event, and it made a huge impression on me. Most importantly, it really framed exactly where the world of music in the academy was at that moment. In 1989, the digital revolution was just beginning to be felt through the new technologies like optical discs. Those of us who had not yet already completed our retroconversion projects to render our card catalogs machine readable for the new online catalogs were rushing to do so. The commercialization and impact of the internet were still merely topics of speculation. So, At the symposium, in framing her prologue, Suzanne Sommer, and many of you, I'm sure, know her, and she was a past president of NEMLA, but she remarked on the content about to be presented by stating, and I quote her here, "Though there is some mention of technology in the first group of papers, there is almost none after that. No great discussion of online access points, electronic collecting, or the organization and preservation of materials in libraries. I take this to mean that our scholarly colleagues trust us to know and apply technology, and that we can concentrate on matters a great deal more fundamental." Now, at the time, I interpreted this remark, whether I'm right or wrong in my interpretation, but I interpreted it to mean to be a kind of actually gentle warning that we all needed to be paying more attention to the technology's role while we were engaged in the scholarly and archival mission of our field. So, given the enormity of the subsequent digital revolution that followed that symposium through the 1990s and into the early 21st century, I now interpret her remark to actually be very prophetic. Applying technology is an important element to our discussion today. Current interdisciplinary research, teaching, and learning incorporates new digital authoring tools for images, video, audio, music, interactive digital mapping, and so on. These kinds of tools are evolving quickly and make authoring with music or writing with music much easier and more accessible. It's really making it all more like word processing. As the technical concerns of authoring and editing and manipulating media become simpler and more ubiquitous, any researcher or student can concern themselves less with the technical end of the learning the audio and video and image software and focus more on the quality and meaning of content in using media in academic and curricular work. This means that the basic principles of composition, filmmaking, film scoring, design, use of images, they all need to be understood more broadly by everyone in creating their media content. In other words, I think there's a kind of a basic core level of understanding that really needs to be part of writing. In the way that there are writing programs in college to ensure that freshmen acquire the skills necessary for academic writing, like a regular traditional text paper, we are beginning to see the signs of writing with media being framed with a new kind of programmatic attention. In fact, Harvard has recently established a secondary PhD field in critical media practice. This is this is for PhD candidates who integrate media production into their academic work. And you can see, actually, this is actually from the page for the secondary PhD, and you can see the range across the disciplines that are represented there. We have anthropology in the first two in the listings. We have East Asian language and culture in the third one. There's one from the Graduate School of Design, two from the history of science. The VES is visual and environmental studies, which has a lot to do with video and media. And these are like the core ones. There's actually a number of secondary courses that they would take for this PhD that would tie to their particular interest, and they change every year, but this kind of gives you an idea of how things are changing. And through today, actually, I will use some examples from Harvard to talk about these changes. As many of you heard, we're undergoing a lot of changes there, and I think that my mind can only handle where I am. Can't handle where everything, what's going on elsewhere. But I do hope to hear from all of you on what's going on at your institutions in terms of media technology and in terms of subject specialization and where things are. Some of my reading and preparing for today's session included careers in music librarianship at the turn of the century, and several others, and a lot of work from the general literature. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these, at least the name if you haven't read them. In this literature, the themes of technology, rethinking library spaces, collecting issues in print versus virtual content, and topics involving music librarians in the scholarship of music. These same themes are relevant in other subject areas, all of the same dynamics impacting our culture in general are impacting all subject areas, in our institutions in particular. And these dynamics are actually the economy and the technology, and the economy and technology are really creating new paradigms and expectations for research, teaching, and learning. So, back to Gauguin's three questions as our framework, I think it is important to paint ourselves a large, broad strokes picture of what we do in the field of education as librarians. At times, my own mental image of what we attempt as librarians has the look and feel of a Tower of Babel. There seem to be an overwhelming number of complicating and conflicting factors that make up the fabric of our current state of libraries and librarianship, all relating to the dynamics of economy and technology. So, where do we come from? Just briefly, the idea of dividing the curriculum and subject specialization goes back a very long time in the history of education. The early Vedic schools in India before 500 BC conceived of teaching 18 arts and crafts, and it's speculated that one of these was music. We all know that our modern Western universities grew out of the medieval universities of Europe, where the 7 liberal arts were divided into the trivium, which included grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the quadrivium, which included arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. And this is a model of that from 1180. So much of the thought and ideas of the medieval universities were derived from the tradition of the ancient Greeks, including ideas about music and its role in education and moral character. Clearly, the fabric of a particular time and a particular culture frames the way subjects and divisions of learning are conceived within it. So, if the 7 sister arts represents the model of medieval universities that we evolved from, what does the model look like for our universities today? The beginning of an answer may be suggested in a web usage data clickstream map, which is shown here, created by Johan Bolin at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, tracking aggregated relationships of how users looking at one article and moving on to other articles across 35,000 journals. Bolin mapped the interdisciplinary relationships. Now, I should point out actually that he was really interested in the sciences and the interdisciplinary use of journals in the sciences. And what you'll see is actually there's one, there's kind of a cluster here, and this is really the social sciences and some of the humanities. And like around the outside, really all these different colors kind of represent the various parts of the sciences. And all the lines show all of the interconnections. And even though this is really kind of based on the sciences, what's interesting here is this little nodule here, this is the music piece. It's in here. So even in the sciences and going through all the things, there are still connections here. So, but we're still trying to figure this out, and there's a lot of debate about what this shows and how to interpret this kind of data, but it's something that we are trying to grapple with. And it certainly shows that we are very interdisciplinary in our thinking these days. Considering the subject of music, we can only speculate about the origin of music, with nothing more to rely on than observing remote, isolated cultures, rare cultures where modern technology has not yet invaded. In observing these presumed hermetic cultures, we hope to glimpse primordial elements preserved in a biological library of human memory through oral traditions. One example of such a rare culture would be like the people of Tuva. In his book, Where Rivers and Mountains Sing, Theodore Levin quotes a statement from Tuvan shaman Mungush Kanin Lapsan, and I will quote him here. He says, "Our music all began from imitating the sounds of animals. For the Tuvans, the sounds of nature have been our school, our university. With animals so integral to the Tuvan daily lives, it's not surprising to find Tuvans portraying animals in their music for creative expression, as well as for practical daily herding and care of livestock." If I had a longer period of time, I might play some examples, but I don't. But you're all music librarians, I'm sure you can find them. One concept that I find interesting in Levin's book is that music and sounds are sometimes referred to as technology. It is clear that the Tuvans are using music as a kind of toolbox and accomplishing an array of purpose in the domain of their culture. But is it technology? We in this room use music in our culture, and most of us are subject specialists by training, if not articulated in our job descriptions, whether it be musicology, performance, theory, or composition. But do we, like the Tuvans, apply these technologies in the domain of our culture? My own thinking on this and my own answer is yes, we do. And I see the digital technology as providing us with new opportunities for teaching basic skills in music and the fine arts and the performing arts in general. So, what are we? Today, Academic research and the curriculum have become very interdisciplinary. As I mentioned, the dynamics that are driving the domain of our culture are our academic institutions within that culture, are the economy and the technology and the new unfolding paradigms in research, teaching, and learning. As subject librarians, or librarians with a subject expertise, we are now in a phase of tremendous innovation, and we need to be inventing new ways of participating in this innovation for ourselves. In accomplishing any kind of innovation, it will take a new kind of collaboration among our institutions, professional organizations, and with each of ourselves acting as agents within these collaborations. With digital technology now central in our cultural domain, we are scrambling to adapt to it with new models of library as place, library services, new physical and virtual domains in accomplishing our work. But as subject specialists, where are we? Gilman and Lindquist, in their 2010 article, Academic Research Librarians with Subject Doctorates, Experiences and Perceptions, 1965 to 2006, examined the trend of dwindling PhD scholars due to the economic forces, and this is actually further fueled by improvements in vendor profiling services, so they know what you want. You don't need an expert to know what you want as much. With music, it would be interesting to hear more from you. I think music may be, because it is so special, it may be a bit different. In other fields, every field is different, so this is kind of an interesting question. What I found interesting this morning in Michelle's opening remarks, she was talking about the student body here. Now, back when I was a student here, which was quite a while ago now, a lot of people were in their 30s. A lot of people had PhDs, actually, and then were coming here for their MLS. And I just thought it was really interesting piece for her to be saying that now people are in their 20s, and that's not the case. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle in trying to figure out what's going on. But certainly, there's a dwindling PhD scholars, and another trend that we're seeing is subject positions are being combined. One person is responsible for multiple subject areas. What I have here is actually a survey of full-time higher education faculty. And in the survey, there was a whole thing. I kind of pulled out these numbers and put them in a graph. And I just did a couple of questions. And as you can see, this actually comes... this is data from Primary Research Group in New York. Now, in my new position as head of Maps, Media, Data, and Government Information, I actually have a new appreciation for data. I think data is something you should always question, never take at face value. What this does represent, if you go in here, it's actually, this is really not research universities, so this does not include Princeton, Yale, and Harvard. This really includes four-year colleges. So it's really kind of narrow in its focus. It actually surveyed faculty in the U.S. and Canada. As you can see on the graph on the left there, U.S. is, when asked the question, does your library have a subject specialist in your area of scholarship? In the U.S., it's like about 35%, where in Canada, it's up close to 60%. So I'm not sure quite what that means, but that's there. And the graph on the right, this question is actually broken down by subject area. And although these are kind of broad lumpings of subjects, so it's not really detailed in the way it's out. You can see that math and engineering are put together. The performing arts are all kind of lumped together. What's interesting is, and the question is, when it is broken down, that the performing arts come out last as far as colleges having a subject specialist. And here is actually a follow-up question. If your library has a subject specialist in your field, they're asking the faculty member, have you ever had contact with this individual? And this is kind of interesting. And again, the art and performing arts, which presumably includes music, actually comes out low in this end. Now, this is interesting. I'm not sure why. Numbers don't tell us why. I mean, you should always question numbers. We don't really know exactly what this means, but it's some kind of a profile that shows us that something's going on there. And I would be interested to hear what kind of contact you all have. So, since technology is central to the issue, it would be good to be clear about what technology is. To do this, I find W. Brian Arthur a valuable resource. He is an economist, an external professor at the Santa Fe Institute, and a visiting researcher at the Palo Alto Research Center. And he was formerly the Morrison Professor of Economics and Population Studies at Stanford University. In his book, The Nature of Technology, What It Is and How It Evolves, he gives three useful definitions for talking about technology with more precision. As you can see here, one is a means to fulfill a human purpose through a method, a process, or a device. Certainly the Tubans with their music, this would qualify as technology there, if you want to look at it in that way. The second definition is an assemblage of practices and components. Here are collections and toolboxes. And a collection of devices and engineering practices is the third one. They're available within a culture, and this is more of a mechanical thinking about it. And I suppose if you, in our modern day of thinking, if we consider biomechanics, then perhaps the Tuvan singing might also qualify under that definition as well. Arthur defines a domain as a realm in the imagination where a designer can imagine what can be done. In imagining what can be done, he describes designers and experts disappearing mentally into domain worlds in the same way that we disappear mentally into the world of English when we write a letter. The enabling technologies that bring about a new domain take time and emerge as economic and cultural conditions are right. An example that Arthur gives is the invention of the electric motor in the 1870s. And this was invented, the electric motor was invented during the domain of the steam engine, that domain began in the 1760s. With factory and industry built and designed for production using steam power, it took more than 40 years for the domain of the electric motor to become the new domain, and that was around 1920. Our current digital domain had its beginnings in the 1940s, but it didn't become a domain until the 1990s, right after the symposium that I mentioned at the beginning. Now, not only does our new domain have us librarians digitizing our collections, buying ebooks, devising virtual reference services, but we are imagining what can be done by inventing new tools and processes to accomplish our work, access to our content of our collection, and aligning our new kind of user experience, an experience where more is available anytime, anywhere, in any way. Now, one thing I know I read every year when it comes out is the Horizon Report. Is everyone here familiar with that? This is actually produced by the New Media Consortium in conjunction with EDUCAUSE. And these are two conferences I would usually attend one or the other each year. And by the way, the New Media Consortium is meeting this year at MIT in mid-June. So you might want to look to see what the program is about. You might find that of interest if you're interested in new technology and education. But actually, having things available anytime, anywhere, in any way is actually the number one trend that they list in their 2012 report as affecting educational technology. So writing with media is being used and assigned in a growing number of classroom assignments. A sampling of courses where faculty at Harvard are using multimedia in writing with media as a supplement to the written paper or in lieu of a traditional written paper include courses like from African American Studies, a course titled Film for Social Change. There's a course, American Musical and American Culture. There's a course on the arts of East Asia that's very multimedia. There's an anthropology course in Giza. There's a course on medicine and body in East Asia and Europe, where they compare medicine from two different philosophies. There's a freshman seminar on global pop music. There's a history of science course on sex, gender, and evolution. There's a Japanese history course on lady samurai in medieval Japan. There's a science and physical universe course called Primitive Navigation. And there's one that's from a grouping of general education courses called The Societies of the World on the pyramid schemes of Egypt. What's interesting in this class is actually they have a classroom that's actually, they have three-dimensional modeling of the pyramids and the chambers and everything. So the class actually goes in there and actually have a three-dimensional experience while they talk about the archaeology and the culture of the time. In supporting these courses at Harvard, we have small teams of librarians and educational technologists working directly with faculty to provide both subject and technical expertise to ensure that students have the tools and skills that they need to write with media. These teams help to guide students through any particular basic skills in software or in finding a library and museum resources that align with the faculty member's expectations and goals for any particular assignment or project. The idea is that students should be able to focus on the content of their multimedia assignments and not be distracted or bogged down by the technology or the lack of skill in using a particular software for the particular purpose in the assignment. We accomplish this through specially designed sessions for students worked out in conjunction with the faculty members. For efficiency, the most common softwares used for student assignments are broken down into small instruction modules that can be used independently or in various combinations. Media staff in the library are trained to deliver these modules, and so that's how we do. We kind of have set things to do it. But we also have more faculty coming to us all the time with new kinds of assignments. There does seem to be a kind of baseline core grouping of kind of software that people use, so we're not responsible for everything. But we do have actually hundreds of kinds of software available in our lab. One of the things that helps us get by is actually we subscribe to a service called lynda.com. It has hundreds of kinds of software for all kinds of authoring. They keep it up to date, so every time there's a new version of something, it's immediately they very quickly have an updated version of that software in there. The beauty of it is you don't have to watch a whole video to watch the whole software. You have a particular piece of that software you're interested in or a particular task you want to do, you can watch like a little 1 or 2 minute segment and get what you need to know. So we really survive by that. What we're trying to do now is to get a university-wide license to do this. But Harvard being complicated, and I'm sure you've all heard about our reorganization there. Part of our reorganization has helped us get through some of this complicated way. We have no way to pay for that as a university. I mean, this sounds silly. But what we, presumably in the new Harvard Library, you've probably heard that, but we're also reorganizing all of our IT, so there's one university IT. We've never had this. And I think once that happens, we may actually be in a better position to do things like that. I certainly hope so. So, as I mentioned before, I did some preliminary reading here, and in the title, Careers in Music Librarianship, they talk about education and core competencies for the music librarian. And now Jean Morrow has an article in there on this. And she talks about the added advantage of knowing languages or having other subjects. Communication and teaching skills are always a big plus. And she always made a big point about music librarians needing to be proficient with the technology, both the hardware and software. And I think that it's probably more true now than even when this was published. As subject specialists, we have an important role to play as experts and advocates for writing with media in our particular areas. My own thinking is that music librarians will need to be adept in working with non-music specialists. And I think that Ned Quist actually summed it up exactly right when he said that much of what the future practitioners of this profession will need to know will not be taught in library schools or music schools, but it'll grow out of the inquisitiveness of the committed professional. I think that is absolutely right. However, we are now in a trend toward a shrinking librarian scholar, positions where librarians have PhDs, due to the economic tide pulling against academic libraries institutions. There is an increasing trend toward towards merging subject positions into fewer consolidated positions, or to distribute specialized subject areas more broadly among non-specialists. We need to be prepared to be effective advocates for retaining subject-specific expertise, and maybe to be ready to devise new collaborative ways of maintaining subject expertise. So anyway, this actually is a slide of multimedia lab in the Lamont Library at Harvard University. As you can see, we have all kinds of equipment for doing just about everything you can imagine in there. When students come to us with these media projects, it's not expected that they do a Hollywood studio polished multimedia kind of a project. A lot of the software allows you to do things that look pretty good, pretty easily, but the real point is the content, really producing content that's meaningful, to be able to kind of tell a story and really capture the point that you're trying to make using audio and video and music and text and anything else that you can imagine. So where are we going? Currently at Harvard, we have the Bach Center for Teaching and Learning, and this is a center actually that encourages faculty to be very innovative in their classroom teaching. They actually encourage a lot of multimedia work in the classroom, as you can see from this description. And under them, we have another program in the general education program, in the undergraduate program. I mentioned teams earlier in my talk. These teams of subject specialists and technology specialists get together, particularly when a faculty have a new course that they're putting or redesigning a course. The idea is that they get together at the beginning and talk about what's possible and put together a program, including any kind of immediate training that for things that you would expect students to know. It's all built right in. We also have a Harvard Shorts Film Festival. This was started by Professor Kuriyama, who's in the East Asian Studies Department. The whole point of this film festival is actually to raise awareness about writing with media. This film festival, it actually has a prize, and it's a competition every year. It's open to not only students, but it's open to faculty, it's open to staff, it's open to anyone in Harvard University. The whole point is to kind of, like I said, to raise the bar on the skill level in writing with media. So really what happens is each year you have the winners, and the winners serve as kind of a bar as to what the standards are. So the hope is that this is part of the programming of people to have a better understanding of writing with media. Also at Harvard, we have the Office for Scholarly Communication. They're very interested in open access. So faculty members now at Harvard who publish, any faculty who publish, their articles automatically go into an open source repository. They have the option to opt out if they don't wish to, or they have a particular problem, but they actually have to go through a process of opting out. There was a better way to go, because otherwise it would be harder to get everyone to opt in. So you have to force them in, and they can opt out. But the idea is that we really want things in academia to really be more open source. We're all very much aware of the dichotomy between the commercial world and the library world in terms of electronic resources and the cost of these things, how it's really kind of draining our source, and how it makes it difficult for people to have things quickly. Open source is certainly something we're promoting. And along those lines, actually, this is Annotations at Harvard. This is a kind of a group. It's informal at this point. It's a group that I've just joined recently. I mentioned here the Office for Scholarly Communication. They also have a library lab as part of that office. The library lab is actually to promote innovation in the library. So any librarians who have ideas about anything that they do, it doesn't have to be directly related to anything technical, but it could be technology-based. You can apply for grants there to actually implement different kinds of projects, different kind of processes, different kinds of tools to use. It's really been a boon. A lot of people take advantage of it. They're overwhelmed with applications, so not everyone gets selected. There's a whole selection process. This project actually started because I had an idea, because working with multimedia, it seemed like, well, people are working with this, you still need to cite things that you use, regardless of what they are. So wouldn't it be great to be able to cite things right in your project? You could sort of turn it off on the citations. And then you could also link them to wherever the citations come from. So it came from one of your museum repositories, or it came from some other resource. It would also link you to there and to other things. So I started talking up this to get together a proposal, and in doing so, I came across other people who are working on various kinds of annotation tools. If you have an annotation or a citation, really the technology is really the same thing. It can serve the same purpose. So we're trying to actually get to a place where we're putting together a prototype to be able to work with annotations and citations across all forms of media, whether it's hypertext or video or audio or whatever it is. The beauty of this is working with annotations. It was interesting to hear Ronald this morning talk about people not wanting to deal with text, with music scholars. On the left here, we have some faculty who have commented on their use of annotations. And actually, Gregory Naj here, he has, if you actually go to this website, I hear you can actually hear them talk about it. But he's actually teaching a course, as you can see, annotation and opera. And he talks about text and translations, and he goes into it. He's a classics scholar. He's not a music person. As you can see, things are very interdisciplinary. The classics are a very interesting place with technology. They actually have tools where they can go in, compare ancient texts. And they don't have to be in the same physical place, but they have tools that they sort of compare and work on translations of various texts from various resources. And it's really based in annotation kind of technology, people working with text. But I think that the same things could be applied to other kinds of media. Certainly in music, I think there's a place for it. So this is kind of a brief description. I don't have time to describe it, but if you're interested, you can go to this website, see more. If you're interested in talking about it further, you can certainly contact us. So I think anyway, at this I'm pretty much out of time. I have a 5-minute presentation that if I can go over 5 minutes, I can show it. Otherwise, we can break. Okay. So what I've done here is I put together a multimedia presentation, and this is the part that we can't have videotape, so I'm not sure if they're videotaping now, or if they're not here, I'm telling them this is the place where you want to cut, because I don't have permission to videotape the images.